So we've come back 24 hours later. All the decals are down. At this point you could say the model's finished. You know, as a child this was as far as I would go. I've certainly created a better effect than I did as a child, but by no stretch of the imagination am I really happy with the effect. I just feel the paintwork is just too rough. There are lots of people that could do a much better job than this, and but at the end of the day, it is what it is, and it was just a test to see, if you're starting out in a model, what you could achieve on your first time. So what I'd do at this point as well, I'd give it a coat of varnish, a clear coat, just to protect all the decals, to protect the whole model, and I'd apply this with an airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, there are ways you can get gloss varnish or matte varnish that you can apply in a can. It wouldn't be as effective, but it would serve as a good clear coat to protect the whole thing. Failing that, you could brush paint the varnish on to protect the decals and the paintwork, but in my experience it wouldn't be as matte as if you sprayed it. So what we want to do is try to get rid of this real sheen. What we'll do first of all, we'll just try applying this with a brush, see what happens. So let's just come on this edge of this wing here. Okay, just gonna just try to spread it out the best that I can and see what happens, and just keep going to it. Now when you brush painting matte paint on, it won't come as matte as you may like. So at the moment you can see it's quite glossy, and as that dries, let's just give that a blast of the hairdryer and see what happens. So actually that has created quite a nice matte finish. Depends, I guess, on the product you're using. This one I'm using MIG Ammo matte varnish. Design really, it can be applied by brush or airbrush. So actually that's not too bad. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to coat the rest of this with the varnish, and we're not going to use the airbrush because I know that many of you out there probably don't have access to that sort of thing. And I'm just going to give it a light coat all over this wing. Taking special care to get around the edge of that decal. I'm not going to worry too much about how it goes on. Just going to get it nicely applied. I'm still going to come in and go with the grain or the airflow. Come in with the hairdryer again. Right, so as you can probably see now, if I just give that a twirl, you can see that this wing has got much more of a glossy finish than this wing, and that's not a bad finish actually, considering I used a brush. You can still see the brush marks a little bit, but we won't worry about that too much. Right, the next stage, what I'm going to show you to do is how to just weather it. Now weathering's great, especially if you want to just cover up any inaccuracies or any issues that you've had and just make it look dirty. The problem with if you want a pristine aircraft, you've got to really get a pristine paintwork. But in this case, we're going to model an aircraft that has been in service for many years, and it's just got a bit grimy. So I'm going to use Flory wash. This is dark wash, and for you, when you're starting out, this stuff is just brilliant because it's so easy to apply and creates a really good effect very quickly and very easily. So all I'm going to do, give it a good shake. Now this is a clay-based wash. So it's the pigments are mixed with I guess a type of clay, and a medium for it to sit in. It's water based, and all we do is we apply that over the entire wing. Okay, and we're just going to apply that in. Let's just pour a little bit more into the cap. We're going to apply that over the whole wing, and I'm not not worried about how mucky it looks, and you just want to get a good spread and coverage. Try to get it into all of the little the cracks and the lines. Okay, and so you can see that's applied over the entire wing now. I apply it quite thickly. I want it to get into every area. Okay, and I'd often just work it into the paintwork as it's drying, and then once I'm happy, I just, you can leave it to dry, but I'm just going to come in over the hair, dry it off. Okay, so that's dry now, and you can see it's left a quite a mucky film over the top. Now all I'm going to come in and do with a damp, with the kitchen towel, you can try to take this off without any moisture, but sometimes it just sticks quite hard. And what you're doing is you're taking some of this back off. So I'm just going to lightly moisten. Now again, I just use maybe the side of my lip. You don't want to put too much water on. I may give the paper a little, just enough moisture so it can just start to clean the surface. Okay, and I'm just going to working down again the way the air would flow, come in both ways, so it creates little streaks. Coming again with a bit more liquid, and it takes the excess off but leaves, okay, and I'm just going to come in here and just leaves the product some into the panel lines and into all the areas and the gaps, and just brings out some of the detail which you may be able to see on here. Okay, the other thing you could do, just wet and just bring some streaking lines down by wetting a cotton bud and just dragging the product down, and it'll create some streaking that may appear on some aircraft. So that's how you apply it. You may not be able to see very well, but this wing you can start to see some of the detail. The next job is going to be, I'm going to paint these missiles up the way I showed you before, stick them on, and then I'm just going to do a final reveal shot, take some photos to show what it would look like at the end. One thing I'd say is, not using airbrush, you use a lot more paint than you would do than if you use an airbrush. An airbrush gives it a nice light coat. You can't avoid really building it up to a thicker coat by using a brush. You just can't spread it around as well as you can with an airbrush. You could try watering it down, I guess, but at this point we're just applying it neat out of the bottle. Let's just try thinning it down, see if it affects the matteness of the finish. I seem to be wasting quite a lot of paint here, so I'm just going to use MIG Zone thinners for this. And just come in and see what that does, see if it makes any difference. Right, so it makes it much easier to apply. You're wasting much less paint, but let's see if it actually makes any difference to the matteness of the surface, the effectiveness of the matte paint itself. Okay, so even though we've thinned that with about 50-50, 50% thinners and 50% varnish, we've it's still, you can't really tell the difference between unthinned and thin. So it might, you know, if you're using this thinner, it's probably best that you thin it a little bit to get the coverage, and so you're not wasting so much paint. Whether or not that works with other types of varnish, I'm not sure, but it's always worth doing a little test before you get on. I use a range of different paints, and they all work slightly differently in some cases, and I have my favourites for different things. Okay, so we're going to come in now. We're going to weather that. At this point, I'm just going to quickly talk about some of the panel line detail that you can see. Now, where we've worked before, especially on the bottom here, you'll see where we've sanded across some of these lines. They're just broken where we've sanded away some of the detail. And what you would do, what I would do normally, I'd come in with a tool like this, which is a Tamiya P cutter or a trumpeter panel line engraver, and I'd come in and I'd just what we call rescribe those lines, remake these lines by scribing them out. I'm going to show you how to use these in my next build, but at the moment, you know, as a child I would have left that. I wouldn't have worried. I wouldn't have even sanded those seam lines to make it look nice and smooth. But you've lost detail that you can bring it back with something like this. So I'll show you in a future build how to do that. So we're going to get on with the flooring wash. So what we're going to do, we're going to come in with the black wash, because it just, and you can see as we apply this is one of my this one is starting to dry out. Just going to add a touch of water to that, so it's much thicker. So I'm just going to, and this one, you know, this will apply beautifully into everything. And obviously what it helps here is to show you just how this goes down, and you just want to leave it to dry like this. Okay, and then once it's dry, we take it in. Now we want to come in all different angles, get in all those little panel lines, all the little detail, come down in those sides. Okay, we're going to just do the whole of the bottom of the aircraft here. So getting into every nook and cranny. So what the varnish does, the varnish is protecting all that decal and all that paintwork from all this weathering that we're doing. Because what could happen is, if this gets underneath the decal, it'll just ruin your work so far. So it's just a protective coat that we use. Now once this is finished, you could then come in and do another coat of varnish over the top of the weathering to protect that as well. But you want to try, oh, we've got some decal coming off there. So this is a classic thing. This decal is starting to come off, and so I haven't really left enough clear coat. I'm just going to get rid of that decal. But that's the sort of thing. These decals haven't gone down as well as I'd like. I haven't given it as much attention as I would normally. And so I'm just trying to build this exactly the way I would have done when I first come back to the hobby, when making my very first Airfix, rather than what I do now, which would take a lot of care and attention over, minor details. So that's the whole of the bottom of the aircraft done. Well, let's just dry that off and then take it off and show you what it looks like. Okay. Sometimes I use these cotton pads that you get from a drugstore. I just to get this off, I just use one of those with a little bit of moisture on it, and I'm just going to come in. I just turn it over with the dry side. Okay, and there you have your first wing. Just going to come down with that. And sometimes you can leave little bits on it. It just makes it look like it's a bit grimy, a bit dirty. I'm going to come in the other side with the wet side. Just start to get some of that off. Then come in with the dry side and just then my last set one is always in the line of the airflow. The problem with these is they can leave little bits of cotton behind, but they're nice and cheap and you can just clean it up afterwards. And so that's quite grimy. That's the effect I want to get. I want a nice grimy aircraft that may have seen some action or just hasn't been cleaned for a while. Been out in the weather. I'm going to come in here. Now it's important, this is where it's difficult, you know, your detail parts, this little bit sticking up, I don't want to remove that by being too vigorous, so I'm just going to come around that. And then I might come in with a cotton bud in a minute just to get the excess around it off. Okay, so this is where we've lost a bit of decal, but if this was one of my normal models I would be despairing at this point and not preparing it properly. We're going to leave it nice and grimy at the back here where the engine or the engine is. Get into all those gaps. Just using a cotton bud to get into the gaps. I'm going to come around here again with the cotton bud and just create some streaking using the cotton bud. You know, I'm happy to leave some of that in some areas just where the grime might build up. You know, there would be natural places like these wing roots and down in the side here there where it just would build up naturally. So that's the bottom of the aircraft. As you can see, it's really brought out some of the detail, making it look less like a toy and, you know, just a better representation of what the aircraft might actually look like. Okay, so we're happy with that. We're going to come in and do the top. Sometimes you can just use your finger to spread it around. You know. Really good stuff. Okay, so we've weathered that, we've put the product all over, we've wiped it off. It's brought out a lot of the detail and just dirtied it up a little bit, so you know, I'm relatively happy with that effect. All we're going to do now, we're going to paint up the missiles, we're going to attach those and just do the final parts. There we are. Oh, I've lost this.